This free video is brought to you by the Team Topologies Academy. Our goal is to help organizations become more effective and more humane. If you find this video helpful, we would love for you to check out and recommend our Academy content. So now we'll discuss a bit some of common questions that we've had over the last 2 years since the Effective Enabling Teams course was published. But before we get to the questions, I wanted to ask Eduardo, and then I'll add my view of what has happened in the last 2 years since the Effective Enabling Teams course was published. Did you find it helpful also with the work that you do with your customers? Anything that changed significantly, or any other observation that you've had?
Yeah, definitely. I have been having some good discussions and using the course as a base sometimes to just set the better base language around this topic with customers. Some other interesting things that we touched in the course, but we were not yet going too deep, and I has developed a bit more, which is the leveraging of enabling teams in modernization work. I've been very busy with that. I think we also published some articles recently. I published some articles with Nick Tune on that topic, like the architecture modernization enabling team. Yeah, and quite a lot of things happening. So I think we will be sharing more some news on these new things happening.
Yeah, I believe we even talked about this like when we were preparing the course. To me, 2 years ago, I felt like the enabling pattern was still very underused or underutilized in many organizations. And I felt like it has so much potential and power if it's understood well, and if we sort of take a step back from just looking at the cost and actually understand the benefit. And that's partially why we then created the Effective Enabling Teams course, to actually show examples of how much this can benefit the organization, it helps build organizational capabilities rather than very localized expertise. So, and what I've seen in the last 2 years is a lot more awareness of this pattern. Hopefully, thanks to the course as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And also the fact that the enabling pattern is the key. So we can have enabling teams ideally, and we have sort of a journey from, we start with maybe one team, and then we start building out an actual capability in the organization. In the course, we have the case study from ball.com, where they actually, they had similar to what Warren told us about FinOps enabling teams, sort of a centralized department, but the way they worked was very much aligned with the needs of the teams on the ground across the organization. So, but in other cases, and one case recently from booking.com, actually, where I was talking to an agile coach there, and he said, oh, actually, we do this enabling type of work. We use this pattern, but we didn't have a way to describe it. And the way they do it is with communities of practice, actually. And the agile coaches sort of kickstarting those communities and putting in place in a way that actually ends up working as an enabling pattern. So that's really rewarding to see this more utilized. And I still believe that enabling teams at some point makes sense. But if you start from somewhere else, just doing the enabling work is the key starting point.
Yes. I think
so. Let's move on to questions.
I think that connects well with the first question, Manuel, your remark. which is really about this, how do enabling teams emerge in organizations. So we got this question a few times, and also how can we facilitate those journeys. And yeah, I think you were sort of already answering the question in your remarks, because this is again and again something that we see. And the key idea seems to be around the allowing experts to have the space and time to help the streamline teams and people that really need help. This pull model, right? So see who needs help and allow for people that know about that to help. This seems to sort of be the key point where effective enabling teams emerge. Yeah. Sometimes the journeys can be from, you were sharing the example of ball.com, right? So it can be that we initially start more as a central group of people that try to help sort of push a new idea and try to help people, but eventually, the case of ball.com that we talk in the course, you have so many teams that model doesn't work anymore. So you shift more around into the model where you basically allow for people that know about something to help other people that are looking for something, for help on that, or have a capability gap on, for example, the case of Ball was data science. We talked about data science. So someone needs help on, I don't know, the orchestration engine, and there is another team that knows about that. If we create space for them to help the team that is in need, they can sort of like a peer-to-peer help each other. But yeah, so that seems to be how typically this journey comes together. And a note on this is, and this thing only happened, I think we talk about this in the course, we reiterate this a lot in the course, but these sort of evolutions and this emergence of this effective enabling teams and effective enabling behaviors, I think it's even better framed, is only possible if there is space for these people to take time from their, for example, day-to-day work and be able to do some of the enabling work. For some cases, this is enough. For other cases, like what we saw with Warren, we may need a full-time group of people that are just doing that work continuously all the time, right?
Yeah. And again, it can start in different ways, and it also depends on the nature of what you are trying to do. So something like FinOps, it's easier typically to get buy-in because we have a clear picture of what's the value at the end. Well, we're going to have better insights in costs. We can make better decisions on what we invest, what do we want to, not necessarily always reduce costs, but sometimes we might want to reduce some costs, or we want to make better decisions. Other areas might not be as easy to show or explain the value of enabling teams, and you might have to start with just the behaviors. That's why in team topologies, the interactions and the behaviors of teams are so important. Because a typical example could be where you have a platform team that actually provides some services around cloud or around data or something else, where they can actually do some enabling work, right? The enabling work is going to help the product teams or streamline teams better understand the value of the platform as well as the domain, right? So in those cases, the good thing is that if you apply this enabling pattern, you then have, if it's something you think should get more buy-in as a dedicated team, you can show what has been the benefit, right? If we were helping teams, we were enabling teams, and they are now able to better understand the costs of their service, and maybe we made some easy wins where we've reduced some costs. That's a pretty good argument to why would an enabling team with more responsibility, with more capacity, bring the same similar value to the rest of the organization, or the rest of the engineering teams, right? But depending on what is it the domain you're trying to help with, it might be easier or more difficult to get buy-in from senior leadership. And sometimes you have to, start smaller, if you like, and then get visibility and awareness of, hey, this type of work actually pays out in the end.
Yeah, we talk about showing the value, right, Manuel? Somewhere
Yes.
in the course, sometimes we really need to use maybe some less official enabling team, because sometimes people are too focused on we need to have this official. But having some moments where, again, these people that know about the topic are able to help others, and then we should show that to everyone, right? So there is value here on having these people that know a lot about performance testing, creating a workshop where they explain to the 60 teams that we have how to do that, instead of having the 60 teams trying to figure out some optimal ways of doing performance testing on cloud, for example, right? That showing the value tends to be very important.
Yeah, I would just say my advice would be, even if you're not in an enabling team, but you see the work you're doing as sort of enabling work, always try to think about, how do I show the value of this before, ideally before you actually go and help the teams or your peers. Actually think about, okay, what is the payoff of this work, right? I'm going to help them, even smaller things, like I'm going to help them, I don't know, understand how to optimize their database, just to give an example. You probably can extract, if they're able to then do some optimization, and that results in some kind of faster response to customers, which helps do more transactions potentially, or increases customer satisfaction. Whatever you can see that has a benefit, even if it's not, and I believe sometimes we try to be too precise in the technology field. Like, we don't need to know exactly how many dollars this helped, but we know there's some value here, and being able to show that. But you need to be aware of that. Like, we need to, as much as possible, measure what is this value we're creating through this enabling work, because later on it's going to be more difficult to measure that.
Yes. Okay, Manuel, I guess we go to the next question, which again, so it all revolves around this, but we got some questions around this. What does the day-to-day work of an enabling team look like? And this is a very tricky question, because it varies immensely. And again, I think you were getting into this, Manuel. It really depends on the needs of or the problem that enabling team is supporting, right? So, for example, what we saw with FinOps enabling team, that's a full-time, it's a team that spends their whole day, right? They probably have some sort of stand up in the morning where they look, okay, what's our priorities, what are the key points for us to focus on, and they just behave like a normal product team or streamlined team in some of the rituals and ways of working, but they are listening to their customer, which are the streamlined teams, and I think in the case of the FinOps, also platform teams, also probably very important partnerships with them. But in the case of like what we were also sharing, the smaller enabling work, that can be, as I was sharing the example of creating a workshop or pairing with someone, that this could be a way of helping addressing this need of another streamlined team. Yeah, it really I think should be really focused on this, on how can we help addressing these missing capabilities, and what would be the best way for us to do that. And I guess most of the times it will be these smaller interventions, and sometimes we will have these very more formal teams, if you will, that will be working together full-time for a while. It could be the FinOps example, can be the example from our case study, which is a group of data scientists that are basically continuously observing what are the needs around improving data science in the organization, and then having facilitating interactions that go and help addressing that. And they have a normal what a typical team would have, sitting down, seeing what are the important things, and then addressing it.
I think especially for kind of long-lived enabling teams, so we call also structural enabling teams in the course. Like in the example from FinOps, you expect this FinOps enabling team to be around for quite a while, right? It's because you're getting better insights and you're able to go more in depth on that kind of enabling work. For those long-lived enabling teams, there is let's say a team dynamics part, in the sense of, ideally, just like for product teams, the team themselves figure out what's a good process, how do we deal with meeting the demand that's coming in for our help, how do we deliver, how do we execute, do we create more video materials, or do we do workshops, or do we need to pair more for different problems? We might have different approaches, and that should be sort of an ongoing evolution of the enabling team itself, like how they work, how they become more effective, which is not particularly about delivering some service, but it's delivering, helping the rest of the organization. And then I would say there are at least, I think, 3 types of work, if you like, they need to be aware. One is, how do we capture the needs of the stream-aligned teams, of the product teams, right? We probably need to set some mechanisms for people to be able to reach out to us, essentially, define some communication channels, is there a Slack channel that people can use, or should they send us an email, or make sure that's widely known in the organization. Hey, we are doing this type of enabling work. If you need help in this area, send us a message or call us, or whatever it is that you decide is a good pattern for initiating that communication. And then there's a second type of work, I think, which is the enabling team also looking more at our organizational strategic level, if you like, which the teams on the ground that might ask your help, they don't have a global picture typically, right? They have a picture of the domain where they work. So enabling teams are in a really good position. I believe this was also mentioned in the course, to have a broader view of what's happening across teams, because they might identify things, actually, we're helping teams over and over again with the same thing that could be some sort of tool or some service in a platform then everyone could use. So they have that, I see that more as organizational sensing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third type of work is then more execution, right? We
Mm-hmm.
know there's this need, this team needs help on this specific thing. So, we probably have some initial conversation with the team and then we define a plan to help them, right? And that's where, how are we going to help them based on what they know or don't know today. So maybe we give them some resources first just to get more familiar with this domain of knowledge, and then we're going to do a workshop or we're going to pair first to show them some examples and so on. So you sort of establish a plan to help that specific team and what they need.
Yep. Yep. 100%. And again, Manuel, you were already answering this following question
Ahead of time.
Which is very interesting, which is about the right. So how do enabling teams sense the organization and identify capability gaps? And this is a tricky one because on one hand, the long-lived enabling teams, as Manuel was highlighting, they will be doing this sensing on the topic, right? That they are on FinOps, for example, or on cloud or on data science. However, we also need to keep in mind that the questions we were going into earlier, which is sometimes the enabling team doesn't exist, but there is a capability gap on something. The example I shared about performance testing on cloud. So no one is doing that, but everyone starts exploring it, and then it becomes a bit obvious everyone is struggling with it. So how are we doing something with that? So this is why this question we for long-lived enabling teams, it's they are typically looking, sensing the what's going on. Probably there are some communities of practice on some topics that are also seeing, but also think your managers, organizations have architects or have certain roles that can be these. I think Matthew used like these. He used a picture at a given point of like trying. I forgot it was an animal, but he used this picture to basically always be listening for these, for where are capability gaps, and then okay, what can we do? And this can go to our first question: is do we have some expert that could help on this and already start taking some steps there? Maybe we don't have anyone in-house that can help us on this, and this could be actually asking for help outside of the organization. There are many ways to follow from there, but the key point here, I think, is for we will have teams that are in place and they are listening, but in some cases we need to listen for the new things, and this should be the responsibility, I think, for everyone, but maybe some people are more equipped to amplify those signals and be able to lead to some impactful actions.
Yeah, I think it's also related to how the clarity we have on the gaps, and that sometimes is driven a bit from the outside in. For example, data science 7-8 years ago was like was not new, but that's when a lot of organizations started to actually bring that in. So there was sort of an understanding, sometimes even just because, well, everyone else is doing this, then probably we should be doing it. But hopefully it's more like an understanding, okay, this is important, helpful for the business. And so that we might not have all the details, but we know we have a sort of organizational gap. We don't have this sort of skills and capabilities yet. obviously today artificial intelligence would be the obvious choice where I think would make a lot of sense to at least have structural enabling team around artificial intelligence to pick up, okay, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of noise, a lot of hype as well, but what are the things that are really, there's also a lot of value. We know that we cannot get away from that, and many organizations are still early stages, so probably makes sense to have a structural enabling team that's going to figure out beyond kind of the more immediate things like, yes, of course, Copilot, something like that is going to be helpful, but actually, how do we bring in more of this benefits into other areas, maybe not just engineering, and I think that would make sense. But then you have capability gaps that are more fine-grained, I think, and that sometimes it's hard to detect even with enabling teams, right? So with the example of performance testing, let's say it might be okay that one team realizes we need to do this because we're having some issues with performance, and another team somewhere else also starts to do that. That should be okay to some extent. But then if we start to see this, okay, no, but also this third team, fourth team, fifth team are doing the same, and like Eduardo said earlier, they're doing in different ways, and probably starts to have like too much heterogeneity that's probably not helpful. So who is going to detect that? And I think that's partially related to what Eduardo was saying, like, okay, it's everyone's mission also when you detect that. It's not like the enabling teams are silver bullet, they're gonna find everything. So you might be in a community of practice event and you start talking to other people, oh, they're also having the same problem, but they're doing something else. We can raise awareness and try to make it more dynamic and get everyone feel like they can surface that.
I've recently worked with a company that this was a key responsibility for more like technical topics. This was a key responsibility for their staff plus engineers. So people that tend to work like across multiple teams, they form a network and they are like continuously observing the signals. And then if they start seeing commonalities, they would try to facilitate, okay, let's maybe put these people together that are suffering from this challenge, and that person there that is really knows a lot about it, and let's try to figure out a way to take a step forward. And And I think like that there may be many other examples, but the key thing is, can we allow for these conversations to happen, which take us to the first point, the first question, right?
I guess a way to say it's also like, for me, the enabling teams are kind of a structured way to look for signals, and it's part of their mission to detect where are the gaps, but it should not be the only way to detect those gaps. It's not the only responsibility being the enabling team, more of a, across the board. What was and I'm not saying this is the best line, but there was this something about if you see something, say something, right? I think this was a slogan some time ago related to security, but kind of, I think it makes sense in organizational sense. If you see something that doesn't seem right, at least raise awareness, even if like it's not your direct mission. I think we have one more question, right? And then we'll close.
Yes, and this is it's we also get this question. I think we covered a bit of this in the course, which are like the most common pitfalls around enabling teams and their effective adoption. And we list a few here. These are just a few, but we have seen this, and I continue seeing this, like the adoption of team topologies language, and now we have project teams, but we call them enabling teams, and they are just doing these projects all over the place and basically doing the work and not helping the streamline teams to basically be self-sufficient and then drive that work. which is related with the second one, the superheroes enabling team. And this goes a bit into the previous point that we were going into. Sometimes enabling teams are created and they just exist without a clear mission. So people are, they just are sort of going around the organization, and maybe they do some very good interventions, but typically we want to have a clear mission for enabling teams, and there is like a clear focus, particularly their interactions with the teams, right? The facilitating interaction should be temporary, should be really focused on something, and sometimes with the superheroes is difficult. And the other two, I think we already touched them. So although we want to have eventually formal enabling teams, a lot of the enabling behaviors is what probably we should be focusing most of our attention. So if I have seen some organizations like, okay, but we need to get, we need to approve the budget and maybe talk with HR because this is a new type of work, and maybe that's too can be a pitfall to actually be able to proceed and do and get into leveraging these patterns. And the last one is this idea that sometimes enabling teams start picking up a topic and they help on that topic, but then they continue doing so much work on there and bringing so much dependency on them. For example, creating maybe libraries, maintaining the libraries, doing a lot of work that typically at a given moment may make sense to actually get a platform to own it and evolve it in time so that they can maybe continue doing the enabling work, or if not needed the enabling work, they can become the platform too, right? So that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think on that last one, it's very easy. I would say it's a common pitfall because it's very easy for enabling team because they are experts in some area to be trying to help and, I don't know, build some proof of concept, which is fine, or like you said, create some helpful libraries, but then they almost without realizing become kind of the owners of those things, and effectively that takes away their capacity to focus on facilitating and helping more teams learn and upskill and so on, which is the goal of the enabling team, or it should be. So I think in there it's possible also to set up some criteria to try to identify those situations and kind of have a clear picture of how far are we going to go as an enabling team, what is a proof of concept versus something that needs to be platformized, right? That needs some, another team to take over that ownership and to provide the right levels of, performance, availability of that thing that was initially built as a proof of concept. And sort of related to that, and I know in many organizations it's difficult, but if ideally we have enough flexibility in our organizational structures, that people can also make a choice, because sometimes it comes down to individual preferences. And if someone built a proof of concept, they're super, let's say they're part of an enabling team, they built a proof of concept, they're super proud of it and enthusiastic, and that's actually the thing they want to continue to work on.
Why not?
Why not then move to platform, right? If we identify this should be platformized and that person wants to continue, then why not? But that tends to be difficult in many organizations because there is not enough fluidity in the team structures. And
definitely, I think this is a very, very common pattern, and because platforms should emerge from these needs, and you probably need to walk those steps, experiment a bit, and then okay, this makes sense. So we shouldn't say, hey, enabling team, you are not allowed to do this experimentation and learning with the teams. It's just this thin line when you start seeing, okay, this is actually becoming a platform and capturing those signals. Can we actually get this into a proper platform support, and then people from platform can also go back into being enabling, sort of doing enabling behaviors. There is nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah, and you could have some simple criteria in place, right? If we build this proof of concept, now it's being used by 5 teams, maybe it's time to think about, should we treat it in a different way, or this thing is now part of a production system, then probably we don't want to be something that we try to maintain on sort of
on our free time.
Free time. So I think there's some criteria. We need to have that mindset that this should not be enabling teams' work to maintain some tools and some services for others to use. We should at some point move that to platform.
Cool.
We're over time. I just wanted to address very quickly, there was a question in the chat about how do you measure success? What are typical milestones? I think it's probably clear from what we've discussed so far. It really depends a lot. Sorry for giving you this answer, but really have to identify in the area, in the domain that you're doing the enabling work, what are those milestones? Where do we want to go? And I think you can draw a picture where you can go from more fine-grained level. Well, we want teams to be able to do X, Y, Z, and so we need to help them. We need to upskill. The FinOps example is interesting, right? It's sort of clear that first steps at the team level, you ideally want them to be able to identify the costs of their service so that we can have a better view of the cost benefit of the service, and where our costs that can be maybe reduced, or the opposite, we should invest more on because the return is high, versus other milestones. So your milestone could be, okay, we want to get to 20% of teams having this visibility, or we want to get then to 50% or 80%. So that's an example of milestone. And then you might have other milestones that are more organizational, where you say, well, we with this, again, the FinOps example, we want to get to a point where some of the business initiatives actually use the FinOps data to make more informed decisions, right? At earlier stages, right? We want to push this, shift this left, use this as a way to make better decisions earlier, versus when service already running and we already have all these costs. But again, it's in the context of what's the domain that you're talking